Hey, well, welcome. Good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from around the world. This is our first ever attempt from Vintage Pasadena to do a Facebook Live interview. The news over the last weeks has been really challenging to us here in Southern California, and I know literally all over the world. There's been so many questions raised, and as a church, we're trying really hard to think of sensible, sensitive, helpful, compassionate way to respond to things that we're learning, particularly kind of in the area of our African American brothers and sisters, to do with areas of injustice and race, equality. And so we're going to be hosting, hopefully, a few different interviews with people from our community, people from around our city. I'm going to just interview somebody who has been very much part of our community. Victor is like literally the man who can do anything and everything. Like if you think of a job in the church, at some point in his past, Victor has done it. So, dude, you've been like our sound guy. You've been our website editor. You have been involved in like setting up and packing down. You played bass in the band. You've done that and many other things. You're an extremely talented musician. You do a lot of gigs and stuff, I suppose, not so much in COVID-19 at the moment. You are involved in coffee, you're involved in water. You basically have your fingers in every possible thing that exists in.
Like to work.
It's good, man. So we just wanted to have a little conversation really on the couches under the bright sunshine of our extremely hot lights here in our secret location. And I think what I really wanted to kind of ask you about was when we have been looking on the news and all those kind of things recently, there's been a lot of questions about, is this a real reality in our lives? You know, we hear about racism and we hear about it in a space of like, that happened way back when, or that happened in a different place. But surely, like, hey, we live in California now, or in your case, growing up in Hawaii, which is even cooler than California. But like, is this a real story? So I'd love to just kind of tease out and hear a little bit, maybe about like, tell us where you grew up, what it was like to grow up. What are some of the things that you've been experiencing?
Well, growing up in Hawaii was a pretty unique experience because I was surrounded by so many different cultures. So whites and blacks were the minority where I grew up, and mostly were Polynesians and Asians. And so I didn't really come to an understanding of like my identity as being a black male, a black American, until like I was like in my I was like 10 or 11 when I first experienced like the negative side of it. And it was kind of a rude awakening. Like I didn't really at first understand what was being said to me until like it was being said in a more blatant way. And then it was kind of like I was shocked for a second, like how do I respond to this? But my parents had kind of told me like a little bit about it, like things I went through and things that I could deal with. But yeah, growing up in Hawaii though was a unique experience because people more so focused on individuality more so than what I've experienced living in the mainland U.S.
So you just kind of, I don't want you don't want to tell us anything you don't want to talk about, but you mentioned kind of being 10 or 11 and suddenly being, aware of things to do with race. Can you tell us some of the stuff you experienced?
I played a lot of sports, and so I was playing football, and I was playing football with my brothers, and these other kids we were playing with had a hard time stopping us from moving whatever, and then like one of the kids was like, "Oh, you're only like fast because you're an N-word."
Wow.
Like, that's the only reason you're fast. You're just naturally like that, whatever. Because you N-words are good at running, and running for your lives or like that. And so I was like,
oh my goodness.
I was like caught between, should I laugh or should I get pissed off or should I just like not say anything? And like my younger brother was like more innocent to like he just didn't really care about it. My older brother was more serious and like analytical one, so he was like he had more control of his emotions, and I went from being like calm to like 0 to 100. I wasn't too proud of how I responded, but that was like my first like that I can remember like situation where I like realized, it does exist now in this age. It's not just something my parents talk about.
Yeah, totally. And obviously well, I don't know, maybe you've got some more stuff to tell us about living in Hawaii. Obviously, you've become a Californian, at least by residency recently. But just tell us some more about your story and some of the experiences that you've had along the way.
Well, growing up in the creative world, being an artist and a musician, like working in the visual arts and also like playing music and singing, there's a lot of sad stereotypes that come with being a Black artist. So I grew up loving to draw and paint, and my dad was a very accomplished artist, and then he started doing a lot of murals, and I started doing murals also along with my dad and my two sisters. And like one of the things we had to deal with quite often is being compared in a negative way to graffiti artists. So like because my dad was the only Black artist on the island, a lot of people would keep saying like wanting to compare his work to graffiti because he was Black. And so like a lot of times that gave me a negative outlook on graffiti. So I never wanted to ever like work in that medium because I'm like, seen in a certain light in a negative way. And I don't want to think of as a less than Black man. I want to like be positive and prove them wrong of their negative stereotypes. So I've always gravitated toward doing like landscapes, portraits, those type of things. And there's this one thing that I just to me, it always seemed taboo, like not to do.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing and really hard. And I'm really sorry about that. Like, I mean, you're a gifted artist. Not only you're a gifted artist, but your whole family, incredibly gifted artist. If you don't know, Victor's family are like the most talented family I've ever heard of.
You're too kind.
There are many of you,
kind.
in fairness. You have odds in your favor, but Thunderstorm, your brother's just placed second on The Voice.
Yes,
like
so proud of that guy.
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I don't know when somewhere. I've lost track of time in COVID. So who knows what day or week or month it might actually be anymore. But so when did you come to California?
I moved here like just over 2 years ago.
Okay.
I moved here for two different reasons. One, I needed a good change for spiritual and emotional reasons, and the other reason I moved out here is like most people who move to California in pursuit of a dream.
Yeah. So tell us what it's about. Not just trying to pick out negatives at all. What's it been like being here in California? I'm just looking at our stream. Actually, it's really nice to see people. I can see people from the UK on us looking. Cool. I can see people from California on our stream. I can see a few vintage stuff on our stream. Nice to see Sammy, Jake, Pat. Nice to see Christopher. Thanks for joining in with us.
Cool.
And what's it like being a musician here in LA? How's it worked out and doing art and all sorts of things?
Before I just talk just specifically on the musician part, this is a kind of a positive. So I had prepared to experience like extreme negatives moving to LA. So I was like, okay, I'm going to move here. I'm going to be kind of like lone wolf in it. And like, I'm going to prepare myself to deal with a lot of your negative, like fake people and like that, whatever. And like maybe steer away from like getting too involved with the churches because like there's going to be like a lot of, stereotypical LA, like, all about the money, all about the class, all about being that like
just
cool
like me,
kids.
like me, you mean?
No, not like you've been. But like so moving here, like I was shocked. I immediately was blessed to meet some good people, some good genuine people who became good genuine friends, even to this day. And I met some people who I had to learn were not good genuine friends, but like kind of what I expected of LA. But the positive outweighed the negative in that sense.
Yeah.
And so my journey as a performing artist was quite interesting. So I have been told since I was 14, 16 that I don't have a Black voice, but I have a white voice. So when I would like negotiate for gigs when I moved here to LA, like people did not see me visually. They heard me singing. We talked on the phone, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we want to book you, this whatever." And then like the minute they either saw my website or saw my face, and I showed up, it was a whole different story.
Really?
So that didn't happen a lot, but it was something that I had to like learn to navigate. But it was something that it was normalized for me growing up because I dealt with the same thing in Hawaii. Like my brothers have all learned to navigate that in our different ways, but it was something that I had to deal with in LA. But then also on the positive side, I also met people who didn't care about that. Like they were just all focused on like, I like the way you sound. You have a cool look. We like what you can bring to the stage. Your professionalism. Yeah, we want to book you. So like I've dealt with the negative part of it, and I've dealt with the positive side of it.
And have you ever had sort of obviously you've been shunned in that respect. Like people kind of find out, oh, you're a black man, so we're not going to book you. But I presume they don't just say that. Presume that it's like a quiet, like we're just getting out of here moment. But have you ever had any, like direct moments, or is it just more subtle?
So I showed up for this gig, and the guy was like, I showed up to like meet to negotiate for the gig, and the guy was like, sorry, we don't do hip hop or reggae at this venue. And he hadn't even heard, I didn't talk about what type of music I do. And I was like, I perform singer-songwriter, like acoustic guitar. And he's like, you don't look like that. And I was like, yeah, well, that's what I do.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
But I gotten used to it. So like a lot of it is just, I don't know. It's just this is all like brought up a lot to me, of a lot that's been normalized to me, that I've accepted of just how life is, like existing. So like recently I've learned that that's not okay for me to feel and think that way, but I don't want to respond to that in a negative way, but to respond to it. And I'm trying to figure out, I'm on the journey to try to find a positive way and constructive way to respond to it in a way that we can move together as a people, not in a way that's like going back and just doing more of the more. Yeah,
totally. And obviously, that's a kind of particular view from being in an artist way. What's it been like just living in LA? I know LA is such a melting pot of different nationalities and cultures and races and all those kind of things. And I guess we all have a different experience of it. And of course, LA is quite diverse, and geographically, from one side to LA is totally different from another side of LA. But what's been your experience of being here as a black man in LA for the last couple of years?
Well, just kind of the typical things. Like I had to learn like to dress a certain way in certain areas, carry myself a certain way in certain areas, just to make people feel safe around me. Because when I didn't really think that was a big idea, I did end up in some funny situations. Like I lived out in Sierra Madre, and I went on a run. I like to run now, and so I went running, and I was followed back to my house because someone had either called the security or whatever, who saw me running on the run through the neighborhood. And so they followed me to the house, and then like they got out of the car, and another civilian also followed me, and they got out of the car and watching me as I got. So I purposely showed, jingling my keys, like, hey, I live here. I unlocked the door, went inside and closed the door, and they still like sat outside for a bit and then went their separate ways. And that to me was just like weird, of like, okay, like I'm not trying to rob anyone. I didn't have a backpack or anything. I just had like my tank top on, my running pants, and my running shoes, and I had my phone and my keys. So that was like one awkward situation. The usual like going through a clothing store and being followed, that whole thing. But if I talked a certain way, it would change. So like if I talked in a certain tone, and then I would be like, oh, he's like, the response is like, oh, he's one of the safe ones. So I learned to do that, and like I didn't think I was doing it until like I was out shopping with my girlfriend, and she mentioned that I talked differently and asked me why I talked differently, and I was out shopping with another friend, and they said the same thing, like, why did you do that? I'm like, why did I do what? And he said, well, you just like changed the way you walked and talked when we went into that store. And I was like, oh, I just didn't want to make things awkward, so I just did it.
Yeah, man. Gosh. And when we were speaking the other day, you told me a story about being in a store and, literally being followed all around the store and, having to deal with that.
Yeah. I was followed to the store, and then I handed the lady my card, and she was like, just so you know, it's like you can't split the amount credit and cash. It's going to be all on your card. Are you sure you have enough money on your card? And it's because I had items of clothes that went up to like $190 something. 198, something like that, and 25 cents or whatever. And I was like, I have enough on my card. And she was like, okay. And she like rung it, and then she had this look of surprised when it cleared. And I was like, just annoyed by it. And I was like, well, I wanted to return my clothes, but I did like what I was buying. So I was like, I bought these clothes for a show, and I'm like, might as well just like let it go. And she has to live with herself.
Yeah, man, I'm so sorry. I mean, it's really tough.
You don't have to apologize. That's not your fault, man. You're a great guy.
Well, thank you. Yeah, but it feel I think for us in the kind of white community right now, there is such a moment of realization where, you know, I came from a faraway place, but it's common. It's almost shocking to hear that as a story. You think, how can that like possibly be the lived reality of living in LA and, you know, 21st century? That, you know, surely that can't be it. And, you know, you mentioned Sierra Madre, which is just down the street from here, which is the kind of nicest, like, coolest little area where we all go and hang out and drink coffee, and like often we meet, and you just think that's just kind of absolutely crazy. So like, as you know, we as a church kind of figure out how we're going to respond, and you know, we're not trying to make any massive political statements, and I've tried to be super clear. For those of you who are in Vintage Pasadena, you know, we're not trying to pick a fight, and we're not trying to pick sides, and we're not trying to say that, you know, there's kind of like, in a sense, Black Lives Matter and nothing else matters and no one else matters, and we're not trying to make a political statement to do with any one movement or one organization. We're just trying to figure out, oh gosh, have we had some blind spots, and how do we address, what do we say? And I think, if I'm honest, as a kind of white male, I felt super awkward in the last few weeks because I've just felt ashamed in the places where I've realized these kind of stories, and some horrendous stories as well. And I'm thankful you kind of shared yours, and I think I've heard some, you know, even more some pretty nasty, horrible stories, even more so these last few weeks. And I'm trying to figure out, you know, for myself and for Laura and as a family, how we kind of respond to be better and to be helpful in this moment. And I think I'm trying to help pastor our church and think, you know, how can we be part of a solution to this and not part of a cause? And so I don't know if you have, you know, any thoughts on just even language or actions or things that we can just do.
Talking helps. Talking helps, and just getting to know each other and the people around you and people in your life. I think the more we assume, the more that we can miss the mark and lead to take steps backwards. So I think, like, if we stop so much assuming things on both sides for everyone, and we just talk and we get to know and we get to understand, and I think that's the only way we can advance is like as a people, as human beings. And I feel like what's stopping us from doing that now is a lot of blanket statements. A lot of people still doing the label game and judging people because the uniform they wear or the color of their skin, because they had the color of the skin and the uniform that someone else did in a horrendous act. And I feel like if we start thinking like that, it's just more of the same. It may seem like it's solving the solution now, but it's creating a problem that we're going to deal with in the future, or the children to come after us are going to deal with. So I feel like the more we talk, the more we take time to understand each other, the more we realize the things we do not know, the more we realize that we need to let and share so that people will know the things they do not know. Even things that we think is like normal and common to us does not mean that everyone else knows it. And that's like a growing area in my life that I've learned. And I'm dating a white female. And so like for me, like I had to learn like a lot of things that I think are common to me that I know. I realized, okay, she doesn't know, and I can't expect her to know these things. I have to share. And she's been amazing enough to like know that these things she doesn't know. So she asks me a lot of questions instead of assuming. And I feel like that's a way that we can move forward in a healthy way.
Yeah. Thank you, mate. Super helpful. It turns out you're a quite wise guy, as well as being a great musician and a great artist and great at sound and tech and bass and everything else. So that's super good. Well, I'm really grateful that you've kind of joined us. I'm really grateful that you're part of our community. I know you have many friends in the Vintage Malibu community as well and around the vintage place. I know you've got a podcast as well. Do you want to quickly shout out your podcast if people want to check it out?
I have a podcast called Optimistic Dreamer. For now, it's just on Spotify, but in the next coming like months, it's going to be like on Apple Podcasts and try to get it everywhere right now. I was actually just recording the episode with one of my friends who's like opposite race as me. He's a white guy. And we were talking just about like our life experiences and our journey as being friends, and like how us both being from Hawaii, like race was not that big of a thing. Like we knew that it's not like we don't see color. Like he sees me as a black man, I see him as a white man, but we don't see that in any way as a negative thing. We see that in a way as a positive thing, of more of this is part of your identity of who you are, and not in a way of like, it's just a way of how we stereotype you and put you in a box of like, okay, you look like this, so you must be like all the other ones that look similar to you that I've experienced in my life.
Yeah.
But we had a really good combo.
Yeah. Okay. So people should definitely check that one out
Yeah.
if they can. Superb. Well, thank you. Particularly if you've just been checking out us on this little Facebook. Maybe we'll do a couple more of these over the weeks to come. Nice to see some familiar faces from California, and definitely from a lot further away than California as well. So thank you for joining in with our little conversation. Do check out Victor's podcast. I'm sure if you have a look him up, Victor Artis on Facebook, you can find some music, you can find some things that he's been doing. You can also, I'm sure, message him if you've got particular questions. But for us, this is such a learning story. It feels such a healthy, helpful, good moment where we actually, as Victor says, we try and choose to listen to one another, and hopefully over the weeks to come we'll get some different voices from different perspectives who will be able to kind of enlighten us and help kind of fill in the kaleidoscope of everything that we're going through in this moment. So bless you guys. Thank you so much for joining in with us. And if you want to catch us, the next thing we're going to be doing Sunday morning, 10:30 Pacific Standard Time. Is it PST? I'm still learning, right? Pacific Standard Time, 10:30. We'll be back here in this space for worship of a special Father's Day service. So have a great week, and hopefully we'll see you soon.